Facebook. My name is Erin, and I'm a core company member here at Gamut Theater. Welcome to the core company living room. Today, we're going to dive into some poetry and meter with Shakespeare. Now, we called this Decoding Shakespeare, but I don't actually like that term because it implies that Shakespeare is inaccessible, and you need special tools in order to understand it or unlock his great words. But you don't. You are qualified to read and interpret Shakespeare all on your own, and I'm just here to guide you through that process. So I'm here today with Ross Carmichael, our technical director, and William Mueller, our PR manager, and they're going to be helping me out a little bit today as we go through this. So, first of all, if you didn't know, Shakespeare often writes in poetry, and sometimes it rhymes, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it follows a specific metered pattern, and sometimes it doesn't. Today we're going to talk about iambic pentameter, which is right there. So iambic pentameter is pretty simple. An iamb is just a metrical unit we use to measure. So iamb, you can think of it as a foot. Okay, like your foot. And penta is a prefix, meaning 5. So iambic pentameter just means that there are 5 feet in each line. Now, each foot is made up of 2 syllables in iambic pentameter. You can think of it much like a heartbeat would be. It's a ba-bum, ba-bum. And that happens 5 times in a line. So today we're going to be looking at Juliet's monologue from Romeo and Juliet. And this particular monologue is in iambic pentameter, so we can use the first line of it to illustrate this point. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. 5 feet, 2 syllables each, means there's 10 heartbeats. So let's try it if you just use your hand. You want to pat your chest on each syllable. You'll find that there are 10. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. Very good. Now, you can use this tool anytime you're reading Shakespeare to see if what you're reading is in iambic pentameter or not. And that tells you a lot about the character itself. Now we're going to move on to different things you're going to find in the speech, in Juliet's speech here. Obviously, any sentence, any passage in a book, any written paragraph is going to be made up of different kinds of words to make complete sentences, right? You've got nouns, you've got proper nouns, you've got verbs, and these are all things that Shakespeare uses. And if we utilize them correctly, Shakespeare actually tells us in the way he writes exactly how he wants his actors to say the lines or his readers to hear what the character is saying. So, if you have this monologue in front of you, we're going to look at it specifically. If you have a pen and paper or pencil, that's really helpful. If not, you can just follow along. Mr. Carmichael is going to help me move the camera forward just a little bit so we can all see properly. Keep going. Ooh, keep going, keep going, keep going. Perfect. Great. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to scan the monologue. And what that means is we're just going to go through and identify the iambic pentameter on the page. This is helpful, first of all, so you can see when Shakespeare doesn't write in iambic pentameter, and that tells us something about the emotional state of our characters. But also it just tells us which words he wants us to heighten, which words he wants us to really punch. So you do this, as I have just over here, by a dash and a slash. So the syllable that you do not hit you put a dash, and the syllable that he really wants you to punctuate, you're going to put the slash. So let's try it with just the first line. We know that it starts with a softer, unstressed part and a stressed. So that's 1 foot, the clock. You can even put it in brackets if you want, if that helps you. And we know that there's going to be 5 feet in each line normally. So the clock struck 9. There's our unstressed and our stressed. When I did send the nurse. So we've got 2 syllables, makes up our foot. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet. So that is a normal line of iambic pentameter. And then you would want to go all the way through your monologue just to check that the pentameter checks out. So let's keep going. In half. Ooh, I messed up already. In half an hour, she promised to return. Now here's something new that we haven't encountered before. We've got words with multiple syllables. So the word sometimes can be split up between multiple feet, and that's okay. Don't get sidetracked by that. So let's just do this to make things easier for us. In half is a foot. An hour is a foot. She prom is a foot. Ist to return. Now, if you're noticing as we're going through iambic pentameter, when you go with the rhythm of it, it sounds kind of sing-songy, and that's actually intentional. Shakespeare, all the playwrights and poets that came before him were not really using iambic pentameter as much. I believe they were using 3 or 4 beats per line, and sometimes you might use 12 or 14 beats a line, but Shakespeare and his contemporaries decided that 5 feet per line, 10 syllables, sounds the most authentic. So that is one of the reasons he writes in iambic pentameter so much. So let's keep going. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. Good. Now we're going to skip down here a little bit because I'm assuming that you've got the hang of this and you can go forward a lot faster. So just work your way through, and then we are going to look at one together that does not fit iambic pentameter. So we go all the way down to this area. So let's start here and beat it out, and then we'll come to the spot together. Had she affections and warm youthful blood? Now here's where it gets tricky. She would be as swift in motion as a ball. That's obviously not 5 feet of iambic pentameter. It does not fit. And that's okay. There are lots of exceptions to the rule. So what I would do here is put 2 unstressed, she would be, and have this stressed. I would call this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, I'd call this a pyrrhic, when there's 2 unstressed and 1 stressed. And that would be kind of considered its own abnormal foot. If anyone watching disagrees or has an idea, please comment below. And then the rest of the sentence can go on normally. She would be as swift in motion as a ball. And we'll keep going. My words would bandy her to my sweet love. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And his to me. Now here's something. There aren't actually enough words to make up 5 feet in this line. So a few things could be happening here. What I tend to assume is that there are still stressed and unstressed beats here to make up the iambic pentameter. So if we have 2 here, there would be 3 more after it. And those can just be filled with silence. Maybe the character is thinking through what they want to say next, or they're physically doing something on stage. But as an actor, I tend to honor the silence here, unless my director tells me to just go directly into the next line. So if we finish it out, we'll see that these 2 lines are a rhyming couplet, dead and lead. And that shows us that the character is done talking. It wraps up the whole monologue quite nicely. And in fact, right after this line, the nurse actually enters the room. So Juliet ends, and then there's some action where a character enters and they continue into a conversation. So the next thing I would like to do, if you've done all this work, you'll notice that your monologue looks a little bit like you've put chicken scratch on it, and that's okay. You can keep marking up this copy, or if you have another cleaner copy, that is also helpful. Ross, would you hand me a new copy and a different pen?
Yes, I sure would.
Thank you. So we're just gonna switch out here. Perfect. So now what I would like to do is go through and pick out all of the important parts. And I have what you're looking for listed here. We're going to first go through and find all the verbs and underline them twice. Ross, do you have is there a question?
Just a comment from our artistic director, Clark Nicholson. The way that he would approach the she would be, he would elide the she would so that it'd be she'd be.
She'd be. So let's see if that works, which I'm sure it will. Instead of saying would, Clark would make it an apostrophe D. And then let's count. She'd be as swift in motion as a ball. And that works. Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. All right, so back over here. First, I want to go through and we're going to underline twice all of our verbs. I find in stories, whether you're reading a book or watching a play, that active verbs, the characters doing something, is the most interesting part for me. So when I'm looking at this text, either when I'm reading a Shakespeare play or I'm acting it, I want to figure out what's happening here. And one way to do that is to underline the verbs. So let's see. The clock struck. And you don't have to wait for me if you're going through this on your own. Just read through. I'm just going to highlight what I find. But feel free to work ahead. So struck is our first verb. When I did send the nurse, in half an hour she promised to return. Would we count that as a verb, return? She promised to return. Just
promised.
Promised is the important verb there. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. There aren't any super active important verbs there, I would say. But meet is probably what we're looking at. Or cannot meet, but meet is the important one. That's not so. Oh, she is lame. Love's heralds should be thoughts. Should be is kind of a verb in here that love's heralds need to be doing something. So we're going to just double underline that and we'll come back to it. Which 10 times faster glide than the sun's beams, driving back shadows over lowering hills. Therefore do nimble-pinioned doves draw love, and therefore hath the wind-swift Cupid wings. Hath would be our verb here. That's where Cupid has something. Okay. Now is the sun upon the highmost hill. There isn't really an important verb there, other than the sun is where it is on the hill, which is important, of this day's journey, and from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, yet she is not come. So we'll just, she hasn't done this thing. She's not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood, she'd be as swift in motion as a ball. So to be, she'd be. My words would bandy, which means to hit. Like if you were playing tennis, you would bandy the tennis ball with your racket. My words would bandy her to my sweet love, and his to me. But old folks, many feign, as they are dead, as they were dead, pardon me, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. Great. So we've gone through our verbs. Now we want to go through and underline once all of our nouns. The nouns are going to be the things affected by the verbs. And they might not all be important, but we want to single them out so that we can choose which ones to highlight and which not. So we're going to highlight once. Clock is a noun. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. Nurse is a noun. In half an hour she promised to return. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. Oh, she is lame. Love's heralds should be thoughts. So I would say heralds and thoughts. Would you guys say we can count thoughts as a noun because it's a thing we're talking about? Which 10 times faster glide than the sun's beams. So beams are the noun, and we're just clarifying that it's the sun's beams that we're talking about. Driving back shadows over lowering hills. Therefore do nimble-pinioned doves draw love. So I would say doves and love is a noun for our purposes here. All right, and therefore hath the wind-swift Cupid wings. I'm going to say Cupid and wings. Now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey. Would we count journey in that, I think? And from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours. Yet she is not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood, She'd be as swift in motion as a ball. My words would bandy her to my sweet love. That's Romeo. And his to me. But old folk, many fain as they are dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. Great. So we've gone through and we've underlined once all of our verbs. All of our nouns, and we've underlined twice all of our verbs. Now this is my favorite part. We're going to go through and we're going to circle all of the images that Shakespeare paints for us. And by image, I mean a picture he clearly describes. Sometimes it's a metaphor, sometimes it's a physical thing that a character is describing. An image. So let's go through and we'll find an example here. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. It's pretty straightforward. In half an hour she promised to return. Perchance she cannot meet him. That's not so. Oh, she is lame. And then here we come to our first image. Love's heralds should be thoughts. I would say love's heralds can be a pretty specific image. So we'll circle that. Which 10 times faster glide than the sun's beams. Now, sun's beams can also be an image. So we'll circle that. Driving back shadows over lowering hills. That's kind of an image, because you can imagine that happening, but really we're more concerned, I think, with the sun's beams, and then this is what they're doing. Although,
I think the whole thing's an image.
Yeah.
Sun's beams driving back.
I would say this whole thing could be an image. Just depends on how you want to approach it. Therefore do nimble-pinioned doves draw love. I would say nimble-pinioned doves drawing love is an image for sure. Ross, would you mind getting me a different pen? Thank you. And therefore hath the wind-swift Cupid wings. I would say that Cupid's wind-swift wings are an image. Now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey. I would say the sun upon the highmost hill. Oh, there, it's kind of working. Of this day's journey, and from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, yet she is not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood? Now you could argue that warm youthful blood is an image. Or just a thought that we really want to highlight. Yes, Adam. Adam says, wow, Shakespeare is complex. Adam, you know how to do this. You've done Young Acting Company. She'd be as swift in motion as a ball. A ball in motion is definitely an image that we want to include. Thank you, Ross. New pen. Oh, that's much better. My words would bandy her to my sweet love and his to me. Now, I wouldn't say my sweet love is an image per se, but as an actor, if I'm doing this monologue as Juliet and I have a really specific idea in my head of what my sweet love looks like, that just makes it even better for me because I can be really, really specific in my delivery of this. And you'd be surprised what you can communicate to an audience when you as an actor or a reader have a really specific image in mind for something. But let's continue. My words would bandy her to my sweet love and his to me. But old folks, there's an image you can definitely circle. Many fain as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. Well, pale as lead is definitely an image. But this whole thing, an older person acting in this way is definitely a huge image. Now you can stop there, or something that a teacher I had in college used to have us do is you can actually draw these things next to the line itself, if that helps you. Or if you're not a drawer, you can Google image search some of these keywords and just pick out images that really stick with you or strike you. You can print them out or just have them in your browser for your reference. Like I said, the more specific of an image you can paint for yourself in your brain, the more rich the text will become. And if you are an actor and you want to perform this, it'll just enrich your performance with more specificity, which is always a good thing. Now, something we don't quite have time for today, but you can do on your own in the future, if you would like, is to bracket all of the complete thoughts. And I'll just give you one example. Obviously, as you can see, Shakespeare doesn't always just have one line per sentence, right? Sometimes it runs over into the next line of verse, or it stops in the middle and then starts a new one. And so it can be helpful to bracket all of the complete thoughts so that you're not stuck at the end of each line figuring out, okay, wait, do I connect these two lines? Are they different thoughts? Are they the same? So for example, let's go here. Here, the sentence starts in the middle of this line, love's heralds should be thoughts, but really the whole thought would continue all the way down. So let's just read it. Love's heralds should be thoughts, which 10 times faster glide than the sun's beams, driving back shadows over lowering hills. You could stop the thought there, but I would keep going. Therefore do nimble-pinioned doves draw love, and therefore hath the wind-swift Cupid wings. There's period, end of thought. So you bracket so that you can see visually that all of this from here to here is one thought that you are tying together. This is helpful for reading comprehension, and also if you're an actor for knowing what needs to be tied together and what needs to be separated. Now, Shakespeare also uses punctuation to illustrate these things, and let me tell you, grammar was one of my least favorite subjects in school. But this is I would say it's a little different than grammar, so don't be freaked out or put off. I like to think of punctuation in Shakespeare as his secret, a secret note that he left in the story for me as an actor to know what he's trying to say. So for example, as we saw here, anytime you have a period, that's the end of a complete thought, right? So you can pause. As an actor, it's really helpful. I know I can pause there, and what I'm going to say next is a completely different thought. You can trail down at the end when you see a period to indicate that your thought is wrapping up, if that's something that's helpful to you. Anytime you see a colon, that's going to be the end of one thought, but Shakespeare wants you to go right into what follows. So let's see. Here we have a colon example right here. And we know that because we bracketed this whole thing is one complete thought, but there's a colon here. So they're kind of different, but Shakespeare wants us to tie them together. I'll see if I can find another example to make it a little more clear and maybe post it in the comments afterwards, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory. A semicolon, which is this right here, just brings two separate thoughts into one. I would say the difference between a semicolon and a colon is that it's almost like it's the same thought, but you're putting an addendum on it or qualifying it with something. And I know Francesca Amendolia is watching, and she is much more well-versed in grammar than I am. I'm sure she has a lot of thoughts on this. I could probably explain this a lot better than I could. But conversely, that a colon is like, these are two kind of separate images, right? We're talking about the sun's beams hitting these hills and driving back shadows. And here we're talking about beautiful winged doves that pull Cupid's love. I don't know what Cupid drives. I guess he just flies because he has wings. But together, these paint a very specific picture. And when you see a semicolon, or a colon for that matter, that doesn't mean you need to stop completely as you would with a period, but you can indicate this through your vocal inflection by going up or going down. Or you can also use the rate at which you're speaking as an actor. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. In half an hour, she promised to return. So that's an example of a way that you can verbally indicate a colon or a semicolon. You can also do things with your body or your hands to indicate this as an actor. Yeah. And then the last thing is our favorite, a comma. So many commas in Shakespeare. And all that means is that we're separating a thought in order to get to what comes next. So for example, of this day, now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey, comma, I'm going to take a tiny little pause. And from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, another little pause, yet she is not come. Could I say this sentence without the commas? Now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey, and from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, yet she is not come. It didn't change the overt meaning of the sentence, right? But the way I delivered it without the commas was much less specific, was less descriptive, I would say. So that's another example of how Shakespeare puts punctuation in here to tell you how he wants it to be performed. Well, yes, Ross.
One of the things I like with semicolons and colons, and I think it works with this one, that a semicolon, either one can be either an explanation of the previous thought or a discovery. Rather than a separate planned thought, for the colons in this one, that it's a brand new thought instantly hitting you.
I like that a lot. Thanks, Ross.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. I think that... Oh, look at this. Francesca Amendolia says, I love how each comma in that sentence is like a tiny waiting for the nurse to finally arrive. I agree. Juliet is definitely exasperated at this point. And that's also something that we see when the iambic pentameter breaks down here, right? At least before Clark gave us the option with fixing it, which I didn't even think of, eliding the she and the would. I would have just said, Juliet is so upset and her emotions are getting the better of her that she's not even speaking in the correct meter anymore. And that happens a lot in Shakespeare. But, yeah. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you everyone so much for hanging out and going through some Shakespeare with me. Gamut, the core company, is here at the co-house, as we call it. We're still working, we're still getting by, but we miss you guys a lot. We miss being in the theater. We miss doing popcorn hat shows and teaching classes. We especially miss our students. As Miss Melissa says, actors are pretty outgoing, community-focused people. So if you have time, shoot us an email or a Facebook message. We'd love to hear from you and see what you're up to. And I believe that we've added a donate button just below this video. If you have any spare change that you can spare, it would really help us to be able to start programming back up as soon as possible when all of this is over. But we're just so glad that you're hanging out with us, and we hope you're doing well. Bye, everybody!